Our guest today on Caribbeana is Marva Sandy, and she is what we call, she's from Trinidad and Tobago, and she's what we call American. So this is going to be a very interesting discussion. Marva, welcome to our program, Caribbeana. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Okay.
It's a pleasure.
Right. Well, Trinidad and Tobago's independence is on August 31st, and the indigenous people of Trinidad and Tobago are the Amerindians, the Caribs, and so on. But there are another indigenous people I consider to be what I call the Americans. These were Americans. Tell us the story about the Americans. Um, who are you as an American?
I'm American descendant of both my parents. My mother and my father were both American descendants. So I stand on the back of my paternal great grandmother. That's my grandmother's grandmother, who I knew as a child.
Right.
Yes, I knew her, and she was eh, Caroline Elliott, and she lived not too far from where I'm living now,
Right.
because I live now in Fort George. I am fortunate to have inherited um, two lots from the 16 acres allotted to my ancestors.
I see.
Yes, it was a gift from my grandmother.
No,
So,
where is Fort George?
Fort George is in Third Company.
Okay.
Third Company, now known as Indian Walk.
Okay. All right.
Yes. So I stand on the back of my grandmother's grandmother, Caroline Elliott, who I knew, as I said, as a child.
Yeah.
And I knew my great grandmother also, Rebecca. They call her Janie Jones. And my grandmother, uh, she was, she had two names. Winnie, they called her.
Right.
And my mother, who is now deceased.
Right.
So those are my maternal grands. My paternal grand was from I could trace back from Amphi and Bashana Jackson
Yes.
and Henry Ransom. He married Sarah Hills, and they had seven children, which my grandmother was Victoria Sandy, but she was Ransom and she got married to Sandy. That
Okay.
was my father's mother.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Right. Right.
So you see, I'm American on both my
Both sides.
both my parents, yes, my
Right.
mother and father, they grew up here. My father lived at Loney Road. He didn't grow up with his parents in Sixth Company. He grew up with his uncles and aunts. Longer when you have plenty children and you have an aunt or uncle who didn't have children, they will take one of your children and rear them. Well, my father was one of those.
Okay.
And then my mother grew up in Fort George here with her great grandmother as well,
Right. Right.
until she was about 8 years when she went with her parents.
Now,
So
these places you're talking about, Fort George, Indian Walk, and so on, they are in the southern part of the island. Tell us a kind of where,
yes.
what part of the island?
Yes, we are in Savannah. Brand used to be called. Is southwest, we should say, in
Yeah.
Moruga, the
Okay.
Moruga area, through
Right.
Princestown.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Right. Funny.
So
Uh, Go ahead.
mhm.
Go ahead.
so the American community consists of six companies, and
Okay.
we call it companies because how the ex-slaves, the colonial Marines who fought in the war, when they arrived in Trinidad, they
Right.
came in the companies in which they fought the war.
Right.
So
Right.
there's first company, second company, third company, where I live, known as Indian War,
Right.
fourth company, fifth company, and sixth company.
Right. No,
So there are six companies.
this starts all the way in 1812, the War of 1812.
Yes, 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 yes. So after the war was fought, the British promised the slaves at that time, the enslaved people at that time,
Uh-huh.
to fight for them against the American for their freedom.
Right.
So the British didn't win the war, so they had to keep their promise
Right.
to give these mercenaries and these fighters their freedom.
Right.
So
Right.
they had to keep their promise, and they took them to different places, and the Canada and Bahamas, Bermuda, and some stayed, but the majority of them didn't stay, and they did because those countries didn't want to keep these ex-slaves who were mercenaries, who were soldiers.
Right, right,
So
right,
they ended up in Trinidad, which was being developed at the time, which was a
right.
British colony, which was being developed at the time. So they were brought kept away from the enslaved people because there were still enslaved people in Trinidad at the time.
Yeah,
So they brought them in the jungle here in Moruga to eke out a living. So they resilient as they were, they formed the companies, they came as companies and they populated the place, clean it up
right.
and we are still residing here.
But you know, this is so amazing because I grew up in Princeton, just on the outskirts of where these companies are. And I never
Yeah.
knew anything about Americans. I mean, do you feel unjust by the governments that followed in not making this a more prominent part of the lifestyle of the people of Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, I I am in an organization known as American Heritage Foundation. I'm the president of the American Heritage Foundation.
Yes,
And we have embarked on programs and exercises to inform and enlighten the Trinidad population about the Americans.
right,
Now, growing up as a child, I knew that I was American because my parents and my grandparents told me that I was American. But
right.
to be called American in those days, in the 50s and 60s and earlier,
Yeah,
it was a kind of derogatory kind of term to be
right.
called
American.
to be termed American. So
Yes,
it was Trinidad's best kept secret.
right.
But the Americans, some of them moved out because they contributed a lot to the landscape of Trinidad.
Yes,
And they
yeah.
they network with each other in silence.
Right, right, right.
Because to be called American long ago was, oh boy, it was a bad thing. They come like somebody cuss your mother.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because you see, they were considered black,
Right,
uneducated,
right,
and illiterate people. But
right,
in fact, they were not,
right, right, right,
because most of the artisans you could find were from this area, from the company villages, you know.
right,
So since we have formed our organizations, there were some before us who started working, but we did a lot of work.
right, right,
Um, Trinidad know about the Americans, and everybody now want to know who their grandparents were, who their ancestors were, to be associated with the Americans now.
right, 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 right. Well, at least the governor of Trinidad then, Sir Ralph Woodford, he wanted to increase the number of small farmers. So
Hmm.
he helped arrange
Yes,
for the creation of these villages and so on.
yes, yes. So Ralph Woodford, he was in charge. He was, let's say, he was the governor at the time, so he was in charge of the Americans,
Right, right.
because the families that came, the 781 of them, well,
Yeah,
they were given land. They were
yeah,
all given. Each family got 16 acres of
oh,
land.
right, right.
Yeah. So Americans were the first black landowners in Trinidad and
Wow,
Tobago. All
right,
right. But they were supposed to be given a grant each year, but that
right,
never happened.
right,
You
right,
know, the Americans were very resilient people. We are very resilient people. So we had to find a way to live. So that
right,
we
right.
found a way to live off of the land.
God, yes, yes, yes,
And
fantastic.
some of us still do that, live off of the land,
Right,
you
right.
know?
And living off the
Mhm.
land, you're talking about rice growing. There's a special
Yes,
rice, I think. Tell me about that.
yes. The special rice, which from since 1812, it's to now, people are still planting rice, and there's a big thing now. Everybody now want American rice. So they still plant American rice. Now I think it is packaged and exported.
Yes,
It
yes,
might be in markets, in supermarkets abroad, American rice.
right,
So
right,
the American rice is still being planted among the villagers. There are some big farmers,
right.
and everybody wants the American rice.
American
That
rice.
was that was a staple crop, particularly like Christmas time, or
Yeah,
you have visitors come in. Yeah, man, you're cooking rice, and the bene had to follow the rice, to
right,
make your
right,
bene chutney to go
right,
with the rice, and
right,
then you had your yard fowl because you mind the chickens.
Right,
and they mind the chickens, and they mind the goats, and the pigs, and the thing. And so they had the meat.
right, right, right,
They
right,
had the meat, they had
right.
the rice, and they had other crops that provided food. So they
Okay.
provided their own food. They knew how to live. Because
Right.
remember, a lot of people were not employed.
Yes.
So they found ways of making a living by planting the land and selling, and the excess was shared among themselves within the community.
That's great, man. Well, one of the things that they came along with the question of religion. Tell me about that. They as original settlers, they were Baptists, and
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about the religion part of it.
Okay. Mhm.
Go ahead. Yes, the religion, they were Baptists.
The Americans were solely Baptist. They were Baptists. The
Okay,
Baptist religion and the oldest Baptist church in Trinidad and Tobago is still founded here in Third Company.
okay.
Recently, it was rebuilt. Um, the the 16 acres I mentioned,
Yeah.
that villagers got, that families got, land was donated to the church by certain families, like the Westons, the Third Company Baptist Church. Weston gave that, which is the oldest church.
Yeah.
One of the Western ancestors gave the land to the church and for the cemetery as well. So
Right.
the Baptist was the primary religion in Trinidad, in Indian Walk, and
Yeah.
it still is. And the Baptist faith, going to church to the Baptist church, was socializing for the Americans.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you had to live a certain way to be to become the Baptist minister, and
Right.
to become the wife of the Baptist minister. You had to be very chaste and very
Right.
upright, and
Right.
not drink rum and that kind of thing, and not
Right. Right.
be very polite, and very hospitable, very ladylike.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the there were the London Baptists, which came sometime after the spiritual Baptists. There were four different sectors of Baptists who
Yes.
operated in the company villages, and each village had, maybe some of them have two and three churches.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, they were very religious people, and going to church was a big affair for them. So they
Yeah.
go to church at 11 o'clock on a Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah.
After church, they will have food and drink and thing, and everybody will be socialized and share. And after that, they go home and go back in the evening again for church.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and the
Yeah.
children have to go to Sunday school and all of that
Yeah.
too.
That's
Hmm.
very ironic because I
Yes,
mean, I grew up that way. But the thing is, the spiritual Baptist faith is a real legacy of the Americans. And
yes,
it seems as though it helped attribute other facets of religious lifestyle on other people in the society. You know, um, there's a descendant of one of the original settlers by the name of Papa Niza. He
hmm.
describe what he was like.
Papadisa was my grandmother's first cousin. He became famous as a Obia man through Sparrow Calypso. He was not. I remember my grandmother saying, when any of her children was sick, because my grandmother had 12 children, 14, but 12 was alive, two
Right,
died.
right, right,
And anybody got sick, I remember her saying, I go and buy cornisa. She used to call him cornisa. I go and buy cornisa to get medicine. So
right.
he was a medicine man.
Yes,
But
yes,
people say that he was a Obia man.
right,
But and now that we know that Obia is not a bad thing,
right,
Obia
right,
is a spirit, right?
right, right, right.
So what he's still revered today as one of the greats that passed through the
Yes,
company villages. So he was a healer, and he was Orisha, and
right,
he was also he was spiritual Baptist, and he used to go to the London Baptist Church.
right, right.
So he was he was a Baptist,
yeah. And
and
today,
he practiced his healing and he practiced his thing.
right. And today the
Well,
same,
they said
yeah, go ahead.
mm,
Go
they
ahead.
used to say that he said that he had powers to disappear. But it's not that he had powers to disappear, you know. You know, they had the drums, the talking drums,
Right,
where they send the messages when the police come in to lock him up for
right,
practicing down in the bush.
right.
And so they will send the messages, and then they had a conch shells to blow to send messages too. So
Right,
when those messages come, he would disappear from the scene. So
right,
they
right,
used to say that he had powers to disappear. He had extra special powers, you
right.
know. But he was a medicine man. He was a healer.
Yes. Yeah. Well, listen, man, this has been such an enjoyable experience to realize the names and the individuals who have contributed greatly to Trinidad and Tobago. And as we celebrate the
Yes,
independence of Trinidad and Tobago, we have to commemorate what these people have contributed to the society, So again,
yes.
is there anything that you'd like to add to our discourse of the Americans within our society?
Yes, American Heritage Foundation and the other American groups have been, we have events and things that to in, to inform the population about our existence, all
Yes,
right,
yes,
and the contribution that we have made to society. So
yes,
what we would very much like is that the American story, which is our history, be taught in the schools
yes,
and the children be given scholarships and so to study at universities to know more about the Americans, to impart this information and this knowledge to the population and to the wider world,
yes,
you know, so that we will know the truth about our history and not their history.
right.
Because when their history is distorted, but it's our history, although it's pieces put together by people who knew, who were there, you know,
Yes,
but it's still our history. We would very much like it to be in the books of it to be in the schools of Trinidad and Tobago to enlighten the children about our history and our rich legacy.
yes.
And then we will all say that we are proud to be Americans.
Exactly. So I quite agreed. Because like I said, we still have the same behavior. Although we may be Catholics or Episcopalians, we will go to church, but after church we have to eat. We have to gather
Yeah,
the
yeah.
food and the same same behavior.
Same thing like when you have wakes, same thing like when you have wakes and so
Right.
is merriment time, you know, it's a
Yeah,
celebration.
yeah,
Yeah,
celebration. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a celebration when it's wake up and the bongo, which is a big thing now, bongo and the dancing and the tambu bamboo and the drumming and all of that. That is part of our landscape now, part of
Right.
the culture. You know, that it was birthed in American territory. It
Right.
was birthed here. So, you know, so it's spread right through now. So
Right.
we have contributed a whole lot to the landscape of Trinidad and Tobago and
Okay.
to the wider world as well.
Right. Thank you very much, Marva Sandy. We really do appreciate it. And have a wonderful Independence. Happy American Day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity to enlighten the world about my Americanness and about our Americans. And happy to say proud to be American.
I've been speaking with Marva Sandy, and she's a member of the American family. And we've been chatting a bit about the Americans. We'll be talking more about it. The American Foundation is available, and where can they get information on the American Foundation?
American Heritage Foundation. National Archives have a lot of information. We have books in the stores, and NALIS, the National Library, has a lot of books and have information on the Americans, so you can get the information there.
Is there an email or anything, a website or anything like
Yes, we have. Oh my God. Yes, we have.
American
Um, um,
American
you
Fo-
can email me. You can email me at my email address. I
um,
can't remember the
Mar-
exact email address now to give you.
Marva
So,
Sandy 675 at
at
gmail.com.
yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
yes. Well, we've been talking a bit about the story of the American or Americans in Trinidad. This is Von Martin. Caribbeana continues.